I'd like to call to order the March 12th, 2025 Town Council meeting. Could you please stand for the pledge? Superintendent Greeter, would you lead us, please? Thank you. We will start with public comment. Anybody inside the council chambers would like to make public comment, please come up to the podium, state your name, address, and you have 5 minutes. At the end of the 5 minutes, if you could please stop at that point, it would be much appreciated.
Tim Kelly, 62 Westview. It's great that you have the shot clock there so we can kind of know where we are on timing. First of all, happy budget season. I know this is a very challenging time for you folks as people come out of the woodwork requesting funds. Maybe you only see them once a year. I believe your first agenda item today is the school budget proposal. In Farmington, the school budget has always been an emotional topic. We all have kids, we all have friends who work at Farmington schools. Some of us even have close relatives who work for Farmington schools. At budget time, we need to separate our feelings from the facts. So the latest CPI inflation reading came out this morning at 2.8%. In your budget review, any line item increase over 2.8% hurts the home team, and any cost increase lower than 2.8% means you're helping the cause in your role as the fiduciary arm of our community. I'm not going to spend time today calling out line items. That's your job to address. I trust everyone is prepared. The core driver of cost and funding in our school system is enrollment, number of students. It basically determines how many desks you need for pupils, how many classroom teachers you require, how many special ed kids you may expect, how many square feet the state will fund on a building project, how many French fries you got to order, et cetera, et cetera. I understand this budget cycle we have opted to use the enrollment projection from a different consultant or methodology than the one Peter Prouda, that we have reliably used for decades. The new consultant, and I believe the name was SLAM, was really engaged to help us with outlooks and plans for rebalancing attendance at our 4 grammar schools. I don't believe the initial intent was for them to derive a full district enrollment projection. I could be corrected on that. So why the concern? There is a meaningful discrepancy between the historically accurate Peter Prouda projection for this coming school year versus the SLAM outlook. The new SLAM projection was about 2% higher than Prouda, who we have a long track record with. Of course, here at the council, we always inspect what we expect. So I looked to see if there was another school system in the immediate area that had some experience that we could learn from. As it turns out, a neighboring school district utilized this new consultant, SLAM, a year before we did. When I looked at that district's data points for the current school year, it showed that the SLAM enrollment projection had been about 3% higher than the official October 1st district enrollment for that school system. So, I mean, if the Board of Ed were to say, hey, we have 2 projections and we're going to average them, we got a high and a low, and just kind of average that, then that would probably be okay with everybody. But I think we elected to go with the highest enrollment projection, the one from the new consultant, SLAM. Why is this important? Well, a 1% factor or discrepancy against an $80 million budget is an $800K funding difference. And we spend over $20K per student, so a 50 pupil difference is $1 million. our school budget has grown significantly over the last few years. We've increased $10 million over the past 4 years. So we now unfortunately suffer from the law of large numbers, where a small percentage of a large number is still a big, impactful number. So I look forward to hearing what our path forward is. I didn't want to give you another handout because I think you're probably deep in budget reports, but I do have some of the data, and I'll stick around for the break for anyone who wants to discuss it. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And Tim, if you want to, you can leave a copy with Kat. Thank you. Anybody else inside would like to make a public comment, please? Going once. Anybody online, Kat?
I do not see any hands raised.
All right. Then we will close out public comment. We will go to D.
Make a motion to consider and take action on the proposed fiscal year 2025-2026 budget.
Second.
Motion and a second.
Joe, do you want me to kind of run through what we usually do?
Please.
Okay. So tonight we have the education people here. So they come up to the podium, you go through the education and ask any of the questions, and then that is it for the evening.
That sounds like a plan.
Simple.
Or not. So Superintendent, please come on up with your entourage. Feels like I just saw you yesterday.
If you need me, just call for me.
All right. Superintendent, when you have a chance, can you introduce your staff, please?
Yes, well, we'll go around and introduce ourselves, and then we'll start with the overall budget, and then we're going to go series by series through the major drivers of the budget, and then any questions you have along the way, please feel free to ask those questions. I'll start with,
I'm Beth Haber, I'm the business manager.
Dan June, Assistant Superintendent of Finance and Operations.
Andrea, Human Resources Coordinator.
Veronica Ruzek, Assistant Superintendent.
Matt Ross, Director of Finance and Operations.
Thank you. Lead the way, Superintendent.
all right. So as you can see, last night I went through the budget with you through the presentation, and at this point, after thorough building level meetings, this budget was much higher to start with, and then we work really diligently with our leaders to try to say, okay, we're going to hold off on some things for this year and go forward with, the most important priorities as we go forward. So you can see that at this point, we're looking at a 4.65 overall increase. It is important to note that from original budget submissions, about 500,000 was reduced, and then there was another over $1 million reduced due to a self-insurance collaborative situation where we were able to make some shifts, and it turned into about $1 million savings. So this budget would be much higher if we were not able to find efficiencies in there, and also cost containment and just reductions. We've reduced this budget to get to this particular level. So you can see that we're at $83,240,983, which is a $3,696,744 increase, or a 4.65% increase. So we'll start with our first series, which is the salary series.
I do want to welcome the Board of Ed members, too. My apologies. Thank you for coming out.
So On this slide, you'll see all of our associations increases for next year. And this is the 100 series. It is the major, it takes up 66% of the total budget, and it has a 4.26% increase. And so we are here to answer any questions that you have within the salary series to start with.
If anybody has anything, please ask away as we go through these pages.
I was going to ask about the changes on preliminary professional staffing. So I just, I think it's page 4, where it has the pluses or the minuses or the positive numbers. So those are, so every one is one staff member, right? Or equivalent in hours.
Yeah.
And so with the biggest shift being East Farms and No Wallace, and I just want, that's indicative of the change of redistricting, correct?
Yes.
For people looking at it. So East Farms is some of that staff is shifting to No Wallace because they're getting a bigger portion of the elementary population.
Yes.
And then the special education one, which is a plus 1.3, because I know special ed's been a big important issue that everyone wants to support in town. So that those employees are shared by the district. So it doesn't specifically go to a school, it's in all programs, or how does that work?
It's a little bit of both. For example, right now in the budget, we have a 1.0 increase for SLC, Specialized Learning Center, at West District Elementary School because of enrollment increases.
Okay.
So some of those positions will be school-specific, but then there's other ones that are kind of more, district. Another example, kind of within the special services, occupational therapist is something we actually contracted out, and so that was, you would see that's in, that would have been in the services area. We're actually now believe that there's enough in there where if we hire somebody, there'll be more efficiencies and better service by having that piece. So you'll see that increase in the salaries line area, but it's going to be offset later on in services.
Okay, thank you.
Anybody else?
I have a question. Just kind of speaking to that same page, am I reading it correctly that in total, you're only adding 2.9, like full FTE,
Yes.
right? Can you maybe just speak to how enrollment affects thinking about hiring new staff, and kind of maybe to some of the public comment about the differences between the prior enrollment predictions and the newer enrollment predictions, and what those differences may be based on, and how that may just overall affect your budgeting process?
Yes. Do you want to?
Sure. So, every year we obviously we look at the enrollment and we look at, the projections, and you see, and some of that's the carry forward, some of that is we use, the enrollment projections, whether it was, the Prada one or the Gallagher one, that we did this year for the elementary to kind of really help us with the, kind of redistributing of students in there to try to really get a locked in there. So you'll see, for example, in West District, I believe it's a second grade classroom, we're reducing a teacher level because the enrollment there is going to be there, but then offset by, a kindergarten, increase in numbers. So constantly looking at that, you're always looking at Board of Ed ranges for class sizes. That will, kind of impact. So there's always a range, right? So for, I don't have the specifics there, but I'll just use Noah Wallace. If you have, 4 sections at, 18 students per in there, you could carry for another 4 sections to the next year up until, let's even say comfortably 22. So you could really get 16 more students just at that one school in that one grade level, where you wouldn't be increasing any FTEs or any staffing because they could absorb that number. Sometimes you do get to that, and this is where we have the, what do we call it, the floating, the teacher in there, because sometimes you have that where, all of a sudden, based on the numbers, maybe it's Union School where they're at, 3 sections of 23, and you get some late enrollees, and now you're at that 24, and you have to really kind of make that decision. Are we going with some higher class numbers in that one section, or do we need to put in another teacher, and then that brings, takes the pressure off that and brings the sections down. So that's something that, really, it gets dictated as we monitor over the summer. It's always hard to dictate, move-ins and various things, but, we usually have a pretty good idea of which spots are comfortably there and we don't anticipate anything, and then which ones are kind of these, for lack of better words, hot spots that you kind of monitor right up and through, early to mid-August.
Sure, so I mean, I think you're referring to the elementary not deployed position, that one
Yes,
that
yes,
kind of
thank you.
floats depending on where the, where the need is once enrollment is more determined. And I noticed there's only one of those this year, and I know in the past we've sometimes had more than one staff member who's not deployed at this point in the budget. I guess my question might be to just a little bit broader. Does the enrollment projections affect other aspects of the budgeting process other than staffing? 'Cause obviously, it's gonna affect what you're predicting in terms of your personnel in each school, but does it affect other portions of the budget? Does that question make sense?
No, it does. It always can have some level of impact. I think I don't think it's as simple as if you have that. For example, when I use that example of 4 sections of 18. We have furniture for up to the 22 students, so it's not like, okay, we got a new enrollee, now we have to it's not like now you have to get a new teacher, a new desk, a new chair. We have the infrastructure to be able to absorb some of the new students that would kind of come in with the ebb and flow of the numbers in there. Typically when we buy supplies, the various resources, we would be able to kind of absorb those pieces. So it can have an impact, in certain areas here and there, but for the most part, I think we've created the infrastructure to be able to, handle a variance within a couple degrees of enrollment.
Just to go off that, just in the East Farms School alone, I know there's, at least 3 different building projects that are in the midst of starting in the middle or almost completion. So is that enrollment projection looking into those, even though they may be 1-bedroom or 2-bedroom apartments? Obviously, there's no way for us to say there's only gonna be 1 person or 2 people living there. So they look in those projections of Up House, the apartment building on Barrison Park, the new apartments on Route 4, is that part of their projections, or are they just gathering out like a census of what's going on throughout, Connecticut?
They're different. The reason why we do the Peter Prouda is that is a 10-year projection, and we do that, every decade of, saying, okay, we need to kind of look at the next 10 years. With the Peter Prouda, we actually did it before a 10-year cycle because we had the high school, and part of the requirement to get reimbursement from the state is to do an updated 10-year projection. And then they take the highest projection year of those 10 years to determine the square footage of the new building. So we have Peter Prouda, but that's a long range. It's a moment in time that Peter Prouda puts that together. Would not know about those projects a few years back, right?
Correct.
So we do that for long-range planning and if we have a building project because it is required. We also do every year our own projections using our own retention ratio, and we do push-up. So you'll normally see in our enrollment report every October, you'll see a retention ratio number that we're projecting and just pushing up numbers from one grade level to the other and what that would look like. But push-up numbers don't consider that students move in and out of our district every single year. And each cohort picks up additional students as you go through the grade level. So a kindergarten cohort starts off at one number, and it gains children over time, and it's a much higher number by the time you get to the high school. And as I said in a previous meeting, we have had incredibly stable enrollment while other districts have had declining enrollment. We did not experience that. So the difference this year is that we had the retention ratio. We still did that. We still did the push-up numbers. And then we asked an outside consultant who had helped us with the enrollment ad hoc to then create their projections with everything that you're talking about. every updated project that's going on in the town and what's projected in each of those projects to add students. Now, those projections could be right on point, the projections from adding a project, or they could be much higher. We're just using whatever was shared. Okay, about this project is going to have about 20 more students. It's just a projection. It's not really based on anything but typically what the group that's proposing the project provides to the town to say, we estimate this many students would result in this project. Whether it's retention ratio, whether it's push-up numbers, or it's this consultant coming in and helping us, our yearly annual enrollment projection is the most accurate. It's not a moment in time 4 years ago when Peter Pauda did his, or 3 years ago, or 5 years ago. It's basing everything on our enrollment today, what we know, and then any projects that are going to happen within the next couple of years. And all of that is considered in our enrollment report. And the reason why we do that is to have the most accurate numbers when we come to you, and we build a budget off of those numbers. We definitely, in this year, didn't want to do it on our own alone because we had, for the first time, moving families from one school to another to balance enrollment. We needed an outside expert to provide that for us because that expert was the one who helped us determine how to balance enrollment. So that's just an overview of how we look at this, and we build our budget off this year of the consultant's enrollment projection because it's an anomaly year. Will we have them come back in the future? No. We will then continue to do it ourselves because we're very accurate. When we go from year to year, there's not a big difference from what we project to what we actually have on October 1st. But this was just a year we wanted to get an outside pair of eyes because we were moving a large number of students from one school to another.
And just to kind of give some added context, the methodology for this in-migration of new students, so kind of like, the rollover piece of it, they do look at births, they go for recorded births at the town clerk's offices, all the way through. They look at building permits and housing developments and, kind of capacity there. And then they look at K-12 private school enrollments and factor in, some, level there. So those are just, all the kind of different data points that they kind of look to come up with a projection.
Thank you. Anybody else with a question? Patty?
So, kind of along the same vein, but a little bit different. I have a couple of questions rolled into one, and then probably a follow-up or two or three. So on page 15, it's the staffing by category as opposed to the professional faculty that was on 5. And there, the total change is 13.72.
Excuse me a second. You have to leave the door open. It's a public meeting. I know it's noisy, but thank you very much. No problem. Thank you for your consideration, though. Appreciate the consideration. Go ahead, Patty. Sorry to interrupt you.
No worries. All right, so the 13.72, a big chunk of this appears to be instructional support, which is listed as 7.2, and looking through the added information, it shows 5.01 special services paraprofessionals shifting to the operating budget from grant. So I assume these are individuals who we had on staff last year, but now we have to move them to the operating budget to fund. But I also my understanding is a lot of the instructional support and others are related to special services. I know that this identifies the grant as IDEA. So can you explain how your staffing is impacted by special services needs students that are moving into the district and what that looks like?
If we probably could go to a previous PowerPoint for the board just to show the FTE increases and how you could see how that plays out. in special education, and we have our Director of Special Services here, every year, we are projecting, again, a moment in time, who we have right now in front of, our students who are in our classrooms right now. We are budgeting for the existing students. We're not adding any additional money thinking, well, if new students come in, we should probably put extra money in this budget, because every year we have additional students who come in with IEPs who need, services. And some of those students come in and we use existing staff that we already have. And so there's not a big impact on our budget. But that is not the case because an IEP is individualized. And every child that comes into our district with an IEP has different services, which then has different costs. We could have a student, again, that we're using existing resources, we have a special education teacher, and they're just going to fit that child into their schedule. But then there are students who come into our district already outplaced in outplacements, and that is in their IEP. And we are unique in Farmington that we actually have specialized programs in our district. Not every district has been able to achieve that. So often we're getting to know the child, and if we feel that the child, because what we always are trying to achieve, and it is by law, is the least restrictive environment for our students with IEPs needing special services. So we're getting to know that child, and often we can bring that child right back to our school district, even though they were outplaced from another school district. And we use our existing resources, and they're being integrated into our programming in the district. Other times that is not the case, and that outplacement can range from $100,000 to $300,000 or more, plus transportation. These are really significant costs for us that we did not anticipate. The state acknowledges that. They acknowledge that this is a very challenging and volatile budget situation for us. So there is a state excess cost grant that any child who costs our district more than 4.5 times our per pupil expenditure, they will provide a grant back to us. Anything above that. Now, the promise is that it's 100% above that number. In Farmington, we have in the past received in the 70% range in the past. The state implemented tiers recently. That those tiers are based on our grand list. And because we are one of the top 58 towns in Connecticut, as far as our grand list, we have a healthy grand list, we receive the least amount of reimbursement for our excess cost. We only now, this year, receive 59% of those costs as to be reimbursed. So imagine how much funding not only is it 4.5 times, but then we only receive 59% of any of what we submitted of those, amounts. We only receive 59%. 41% we did not receive, and we have to cover now in our budget. So, just generally, this is a very difficult part of budgeting, and I always say there's 3 things I really worry about in any budget year, and that is facilities, because something can happen with a facility that can be very costly. Self-insurance, something could happen in self-insurance that could really throw off our budget. And then it's special services, because we have students who move into our district that might not have been expected to move in. We also have our current students whose needs may increase from year to year, and we end up having to, not having to, but we need to ensure that child's needs are met. And so we will change the IEP and provide more support. And that wasn't anticipated. So it's constantly evolving, and it's constantly something that, we're working to ensure every child gets what they need in Farmington. And that's something that we take very seriously. And You know, we're going to do whatever we need to do to ensure that that happens. But I will say, if you look at Farmington's outplacements compared to other districts, it's far less because our Board of Education, our town council supported adding specialized programs. The state now is going to incentivize districts to create in-district programs. We did this a while ago because we knew, and we know, in the least restrictive environment is in our schools where students can not only access the education we provide, but all the other things, the club activities, sports, all the things that students should have in a K-12 education. So we really work hard to try to create those programs and keep our students with their peers in their community in the least restrictive environment. But that is something that has helped us a lot over the years, is to have built those programs.
Kathy, you mentioned 4.5 times the per student expenditure is where the reimbursement kicks in. What is the per student expenditure for the purposes of that calculation? Because I think we talked about this last year, that
Yeah.
there were different numbers.
We have it in our budget book, in the back, I think.
Okay.
It's actually this last page.
Of the FAQ.
It's in the comparisons, I think, right? Yes. So it's $20,158. So it'd be 4.5 times that.
Okay, thank you. One other,
I was just gonna
Go
add,
ahead.
and the one page would tell you that that's 107 out of all Connecticut districts, so out of 166, we're 106.
thank you. The one other question on the instructional support grant, it says, it references the IDEA grant. So does that mean they were funded by IDEA? And so this question's kind of going into the question that was raised in public comment last night to federal funding and everything that's going on right now and threats about IDEA. So is this, can you provide a little bit of background or, I don't know, color on IDEA and whether or not this is grant money that we knew was going away or that we're anticipating, or how is it being structured?
Could I add on to that too? Because I think I was also going to inquire about this. I guess the way I would like to maybe see this is, how does that IDA grant money come down through the stream, and how does it get connected up with the kind of, the special services that we need? I think that's what you're driving at, right?
We're going to show a slide that shows all of our federal funding, just for your information, the community's information. We build our budget and then we reduce our budget by what we anticipate for grants. So our budget is underfunded by the amount we believe we will get for IDEA, which is a federal grant, and by the amount we anticipate getting from the state, which is the excess cost grant, the one I just talked about. So we take, this is what our budget is, and then we reduce it and we reduce it. So there's really very little room for error in our budget because we've already reduced it by what we have anticipated. This town does the same thing. What we anticipate, we reduce our budget by. And so we have we provided to our board just a chart to show, because the Board of Education had the same question. What do we get for federal funds? It is in our financial report every month, just so everyone knows. But this is essentially what we get. And I'll just have Dan go over it, just so you get an idea of the impact of what some of the public comment was last night. I will say we're in constant contact with the state. And, at this point, we are budgeting with these amounts in mind. We are anticipating these amounts. And so that's how we budgeted this year. We have not changed that for this year's budget.
So overall, as you can see, we have approximately, it says 1.5 million, that, it's probably hard to see, it's a little shaded in yellow. There's about, close to 250,000, that's part of that ARP ESSER, that was part of the, kind of that COVID ESSER money that it's gonna be expiring there. So it's really, 1.2, 1.3 million that we get from government through, Title I, the Title II, 3, 4, IDA, 611, Perkins, IDA 6, and then the continuing ed PEP grant that they just received this year. What's the Title I with the IDA, that's $106,000 we have for the year, but we also have the ability to kind of have that carry over, and so that's why sometimes you'll see with us moving from IDA to operations, sometimes when you have years where you have those unexpected costs, sometimes you have to pull a little bit from next year to pay for this year, which then reduces your kind of year 2 money, which then we have to kind of put into the budget, right? So you're kind of paying for this year because you need to, but then you got to pay for it, the following year. And so it's constantly that balance. The struggle for that a little bit is when you have, the increase of whether it's teaching salaries or pair salaries through contractual agreements, IDA doesn't always kind of go with that. So, we pretty much, the levels kind of stayed flat, pretty consistently. So you get the same amount of money, but it doesn't go as far as it did in previous years. Mm-hmm. And so that's why you see, not being able to, to utilize it, or sometimes a little bit more dependency on operation budget than you can there. So that's kind of where that piece lands. And you can see there, it's, district demographics dictate the levels and the numbers that go there. And so it could be, like XX Goss, which is from Connecticut, that is, based on grand list. Others looks at your free and reduced lunch population, other, other variables that kind of dictate your allocation from the government.
Thank you. That's helpful. I have one last question on salaries, unrelated to that, but I know that we have union contracts. Do you have an idea of like what % of this increase for salaries is simply because the union contracts have an increase in the upcoming year?
Yes. So let me try to give kind of the best number, because once again, salaries is that driver of the 2.2 million overall. Some of that is based on obviously the increased FTEs, whether it be through paras or in there. So like I said, I don't have the exact, but probably I don't know if maybe Beth and I will do a little calculating for you and try to give you an exact number in there, but
Okay.
I'm gonna probably say like 1.5, 1.7 million of that is probably just contractual,
Okay.
Agreements, maybe even a little higher than that.
All right, great. Thank you.
Brian, you have anything?
I do not.
Dave?
Yeah, and staying with the IDEA for a second. So then, just when you build your budget and you're anticipating this federal money to come down, is it a formula that you already have that you're kind of earmarking money for? Like, how do we know? I know the numbers, I can see the numbers. The connection between building the budget and that number is.
Yeah, no, that's a great question. So, we'll get the allocation amount that we'll have. And like you said, usually when they give you the allocation amount, you have it for the 2 year. So you have a little bit of flexibility about where you want to put it. Once again, sometimes if things are working well, then sometimes we can even, move money, back, to kind of, operations. So you can save that money and then put it back into the next year's IDA, right? If things are working well. So then you have a little more for the following year. So you have that piece of it. So it's really based on them giving us that allocation, and then we start factoring that into our calculations for projections.
Got it. And if for some reason this gets driven right back to the states now, from the federal government, and goes down to the states, that's exactly what the policy is being discussed right now. Is the state ready? I mean, in general, because these folks who come here last night, and a parent that has somebody that needs special services, this would weigh on your mind. This would weigh on your mind, because obviously Farmington has put forward a value system to be able to include these people into the network of school for all the right reasons.
No, it's an outstanding question. One that I don't know if, any of us could give you, a solid answer. We would, the federal government would, make certain decisions. And then from there, the state would have to respond, either, creating more, funding or whatever it might be. And then, from there, we would also have to look, I know as a team, we've done a lot of, we call it like thought exercises, right? Where we start kind of playing around with various scenarios. I think one of the things that I've really enjoyed working in Farmington here in my short time is we're always centered on what's best for the students and what's best for all of them. And so that have that singular focus, that singular vision is, what we'll continue to do and figure out what we need to do to make sure all the students get the services they need and kind of make it work. So, there's a lot of different directions and a lot of different scenarios that kind of play out. But, like I said, we don't have the answer, so we just kind of go based with, what we have in front of us right now.
Right.
And try to make the most thoughtful decision we can.
Right. And then kind of going to the specifics, you're adding in your preliminary professional staffing, you're bumping that number up in 25, 26 to like a 1.5, equivalent? Is that like 67.64 for 25, 26 versus 65.74? So I'm just saying, are you adding somebody, or is there?
If we go, we can go over some of the specifics. I would say in special education, just alone, in positions there that we are adding, it's a combination of the new position that Dan talked about, which is an SLC position. That's one of our specialized programs, and we have a very large enrollment increase for that particular position. And then we have paraprofessionals on there. There are some costs that are a wash because we're just reallocating money from one account to another. But we basically, in salaries, it's about $336,000 just in salaries for new special education positions. But again, they're not all new. The SLC position, yes, but some of it is coming, positions coming off grants, and Dan alluded to that. Grants pretty much stay flat for us at the federal level, but salaries do not. Every year, there's an increase in the GWI for every employee. And so when you have a flat grant, that doesn't work for a long period of time. You have to start moving people off the grant and putting them on your operating budget. So you would see here 7.20 paraprofessionals. Now 5 of those paras are moving off IDEA due to the grant funding and the fact that these positions keep increasing wages and you just can't keep them on there forever. And 2.19 paras are due to increased student need. And what I'm saying is they're already, those paras are here because we had to add them this year even though they weren't in the budget because student need dictated that we needed to add those positions. So that is one example of, yes, there are some positions that are current but new this year that we have to bring forward. That's the 2.19 for paras. And the other 5.01 are current paras, but they were on a grant and now they need to move off the grant because the money is just not there for that many FTEs. And so this is a list of all of the positions that are non-certified. These aren't certified positions that we, some are decreases, some are increases, and overall you can see, the bottom line is 10.82 FTEs. We try to show which are current positions, which are reallocation of funding. An example of that, I'm trying to think of, it was in nurses. You see a 1.0 occupational therapy position, but it's really just a reallocation of funding. It's not an increase, it's a reallocation because we took it, as Dan said, we used to contract out, but we feel that it will be better for our students to have that position as a district position. We'll have more flexibility for services across schools, but it's offset by account 320 that used to be in those consultant services, and we're moving that money over to salaries. But you can see each one of these, and it's in your Q&A. We included those charts in your Q&A so that you can see both the certified and the non-certified increases for this year and why they're being increased.
Okay. Thank you.
Amy, do you have anything?
Simple question, I think. Technology integration teachers. Can you explain what that is, and is that 3 positions, and are they temporary or permanent?
So they have always been in our FTE. They're not new. We're moving them from school. You'll see decreases in each school of 1.0 at Westwoods, 1.0 at IAR, and 1.0 at FHS. They're decreasing. We just feel that they're more district level positions, so we're categorizing them as district wide, but they've been in our district, and it's not an increase in FTE.
Thank you.
Keith?
Slightly piggyback on Dave, and I'm probably being redundant, but we did have some public comment. We've had a bunch of public comment just about the special services stuff. So just for whatever it's worth, for the record, we feel confident that the budget is providing enough staff for Farmington students with special needs, that we're not skimping in that area with this budget.
You know, I think the concern about IDEA, a lot of it is coming from just, there's a lot of media coverage right now. And, you know, I meet along with all superintendents with our Commissioner of Education here in Connecticut every month. And all of us are reading what's going on. We're also getting a lot of guidance from the State Department of Education here and from our legal counsel. IDEA has been in place for 50 years. It is something that has been a promise to, you know, the children and families of the United States for that many years. And, you know, I think our commissioner and all of us feel that that commitment is going to remain. And if there were any change in that, I think we would be alerted and we would then have to address it. And that would be a combination of working with our state, working locally, but it's been a promise that goes even beyond when the Department of Education was created here in the U.S. It's even beyond that time. So, you know, I understand if we're reading all of this as a parent. Our parents aren't in meetings that I go to and the rest of us go to, and we have to listen to those who are even closer to the federal level and what they're giving us as information. So right now, you know, I'm planning, and we're all planning on that IDEA money being there. If anything changes, we would definitely have to speak with the state of Connecticut, and locally we would have to have discussions about that. But we are committed, and I know all of you are, and our board, to meeting the needs of all children, you know, with IEPs and in need of special services. That is a priority, and we follow the law, and the law is very clear about the support that we provide to those children, whether it's at the national level or the state level.
Thank you.
Thank you, Superintendent. Last call for 100 series.
I have one more question.
All right.
This is a little bit different, but it has to do with the Directors Series and the increase in the residency and security coordinator positions and the coordinator technology position, I think. Were those positions, if I'm remembering correctly, that were added last year, but only for half a year, and now they're being fully funded for this year?
Yeah.
Okay, yes.
So there were some reductions we made, but we said we would put 0.5 in, so this is now putting the other 0.5 in. On the you can see it here.
We reduced the end user technology and have added the 1.0 technology coordinator, which is taking on some of the responsibilities that I had as director of technology as I move into the new role as director of finance and operations.
Gotcha. Okay. And then just one follow-up question. I know I believe it was discussed last year that the residency and security coordinator position, there was hope that that would that having that position would lead to other efficiencies
Yeah.
within the organization. Can you speak to some of those and how that's been working out as a new position?
Absolutely. That's been allowed for them to, the security person to look at some residency investigations and try to determine if there were students who, weren't legally living in Farmington to kind of, for enrollment purposes and such and resources purposes. And so, we're always dealing with students, regardless if they're, from Farmington or not. So, try not to go overly into specifics, but, the position has been able to, do its role and do it there. Also, the residency clerk has allowed for some efficiency now because the registration for new students is now streamlined into one person. So as before, it was done at the building level. So all the administrative assistants at that level we're kind of doing, we're doing it at their own, especially for the kindergarten registration. And so now having it one has not only taken some of the stress at the building level off from the administrative assistants to allow them to do some other things, but also just to make that process more consistent. Because what we are finding is, how it was done at one school was just slightly different than another school and there. So creating some efficiencies there in that process, because it's all kind of coming in from one level. So from both the positions now in the security and residency position, we're finding a lot of efficiencies.
Thank you.
Last call. All right. Next series, please.
As I said last night, some good news here. This is not what you would see in every district for insurance. So we have a very slight increase of 0.74% in self-insurance, and this was really after we had set the budget. The budget was at a 5.6, and then we had been working with Joe on a potential, and our insurance consultants, on a potential savings, and we were able to, you're going to, I'm sure, see this in the town budget as well, we were able to make a shift, and it had about a little over $1 million, right, savings. So I think I always say to the town council and board, being self-insured obviously comes with risks, but it also comes with benefits too. When we have good claim years, we can put more in, our reserve, and we have both at the town and the board side have collaborated on those reserves, and this is a good example, a good year that gives that example of just how beneficial it has been to the taxpayers of Farmington to be a self-insured school district. Some school districts kind of move from self-insured to the state insurance, go back to self-insurance as things get more challenging. We have not gone to the state insurance because it would be much more expensive for the town, but also for our employees, because we do share costs with our employees of, the cost of this plan. So, there's not much to say except that it is an example of cost containment and reduction without changing the quality of our health care. It's still very high quality, but just have been able to, have this savings this year. And
Yeah, I was just going to add, and I mean, that's another benefit of sometimes kind of investing, in your programming. And so, we utilize one digital kind of insurance consultant, and so they were able, as they do the analysis, to kind of identify this area for us to switch to from our retiree cohort to switch from self-insured pharmacy to fully funded, fully insured pharmacy, and so to expect. And some of that, I think, is also adapted to some of the changes in Medicare over the past few years, and allows those opportunities to kind of, take advantage of those opportunities. So looking around, like I said, about $1 million in, anticipated savings, and actually the the premiums for the retirees is also going down. And so, it's one of those win-win-wins, right? No change in service to the, the consumer. And it's actually, they're also going to spend less, and we're going to get some savings. So those are those opportunities that, you really love. I wish I could promise to be able to provide these every year. But like I said, we were able to kind of identify that, and that's really been a significant driver in us, in our budget.
Any questions? Dave?
No, I think
Amy?
it's good news.
Not in this category, no?
Keith?
No, thank you.
Sarah?
No.
Just one, sorry, Joe, you didn't call my name, but I assume I'm.
Patty?
The notes within the budget reference the Patient Protection Affordable Care Act and the need to provide affordable insurance, as that's, I'm assuming, defined. Did we have to change any of our insurance, or did we already meet the requirements for providing it's on page 17, there's a
Yeah,
reference.
my understanding is we haven't. My understanding is that we've.
We met it
done that,
along. Okay.
I'm happy to, being the newer guy, I'd be happy to kind of check history to see if there was any change in there, but I don't believe, there's been any modifications needed to
Okay.
meet that requirement.
Great, thanks.
Brian?
No questions. Thank you for doing that. Thanks for saving us money.
Happy to do it.
On to the next, please.
So this is a volatile series. It is our services series. It's about 16% of our total budget with a 10.39% increase. And 60% of this increase is associated with special services when it comes to consultation services and tuition costs for outplacements. It also includes our major facility projects, our K-8 summer school, and any technology-based operational systems. We also see increase, and I think you'll see this in the town too, in electricity, in the transportation services. That's also in this series. So we are seeing an increase more so in the specialized transportation. And again, that's associated with special education. And we're restoring, doing some restoration of funding, and we also see the inflation, especially with outplacements. The tuition rates are going up by significant levels, and that is always, again, an unknown at this time. I wish we could get the tuition costs for next year for outplacements. Often that comes very, very late after we've set the budget. But inflation is really hitting all areas of our budget. But those are some of the areas that are covered in this services series and some of the reasons why, but about 60% is associated with special services increases.
All right. Start with you, Brian. Anything?
The first question I had was on, excuse me, I was just perusing my notes. On student services for orientation programs, transition support, 80%, what is driving that at all? That's not special services, right?
Sorry, could you just repeat the question? I was trying to.
The student services, page 27. That's not special services, correct?
Yeah, that's transitions, from the various kind of schools, commencement. Those types of activities.
Okay.
Right. So as you transition, 8th grade to 9th grade transition.
Sorry, I
and
misunderstood.
upper elementary, Westwoods to IAR and so on.
Like orientation programs.
Yeah.
Gotcha, sorry.
No, it's okay.
Patty, you have anything?
The curriculum updates are in services, right? I'm not missing that. I know that we had to do, that there was a reading thing a couple of years ago with curriculum. Are there any other legislative mandates coming down that we're aware of that will impact curriculum moving like, not necessarily this, but, you know, do you foresee anything that could impact the budget?
I mean, that one's still impacting the
Yeah.
budget. We have some work to do on aligning to the expectations of the right to read legislation. And there are some, you know, specific courses that would need curriculum maps and things like that, but nothing out of the ordinary. So those are actually not accounts that are increasing by very much. We're operating basically on what we were able to operate on this year.
Okay. Thank you. And one other question, just looking at the repairs and noticing that I'm assuming the high school budget's going up because now it's a year through and it's now on us as opposed to the contractor, or is that?
Yeah, so we'll transition, you know, from, you know, warranties that now expire and we, you know, we take ownership. You know, you try to hope that there's a balance, you know, with a new building, you're hopefully expecting that, you know, they're going to be good for a few years before you need to start really putting in a cycle of, you know, continued maintenance. But, you know, obviously, you know, it's a beautiful building with a lot of amenities. And so, you know, some of those pieces, you know, we're going to start having to kind of budget, you know, appropriately for that. So we got like a little bit of reprieve, I think, you know, this year and hopefully there, but yeah, over time, you know, that will probably be built back into the regular cycle.
We haven't brought it back, well, we're phasing it.
Okay.
Yeah.
So things that we have to have, like inspections by law, you know, those things we put back. When we were going to have a brand new building, we really didn't need that this year, but as we go in next year, we will. So we're phasing it. There will be more funding for maintenance of the high school put in 26, 27, and then 27, 28 as it starts to age and need more. But at this point, we haven't brought it back fully, right?
Yeah.
So within the specifications for the construction of the project, each contractor has certain responsibilities, even beyond warranties. So for instance, a sprinkler contractor, an elevator contractor is obligated for a certain period of time to inspect and maintain that piece of equipment. Sometimes that goes beyond the 1 year that we were anticipating with this, so, but as those things phase out, then we'll need to add those back in. If you remember, we reduced significantly last year, anticipating that we wouldn't need those costs.
I've just never seen a budget for a brand-new building because all of the buildings are 20-plus years old, so I figured I'd ask.
Because you had that on the top, I'm skipping ahead slightly.
Yep.
You will see that like in dues and fees. The insurance for the building has gone up substantially, you know, by about, you know, $45,000 because the valuation of the building, you know, they had the old building was valued at, you know, $50 million, and now it's valued at $118 million. So, and then the contents value went from just under $5 million to now $8 million. So, you know, it costs more to insure that. So that is an example, like I said, I'm skipping ahead a little bit, of where you'll see that new building has that added expense.
Okay. One last, on electricity and utilities, town and the board works together and like negotiating rates, I'm trying to remember how this is set up.
Yeah, we work through, I think, water, and Sam, you can correct me if I'm wrong, I mean, water, sewage, we have some things. I think just because of scheduling, we were slightly off on electricity and kind of there. We were able to lock in at a pretty good rate. I think it's like a little over 11 cents through 2027, which is a little better than current rate, so we got good in there. You know, and I think the town's slightly, you know, comparable in there, but, you know, I think we're just a little off on that timing to.
Yeah, so essentially, unlike all of us who are subject to the whims of Eversource every 6 months, that we know it's locked for a year?
Yes, well, actually locked for until, I think, 2027.
So,
Isn't there always?
on the supply side, that is correct.
Yes.
But on the other side, where you see all those other miscellaneous charges that come in, on the transmission side,
Okay.
we're subject as much, if not more, as the homeowner on those. Because we have demand charges based on how much a building uses, and obviously we're large users of electricity in school buildings. So when those rates increase, it is a rather large increase in our electricity bills.
Thank you.
Brian, you said you had a question?
Just, a follow-up question earlier. I was wondering, we had been talking about how some of the things we wanted to do last year, we put them back into this budget. Does that include any of the projects that we're talking about here?
Yes, so you'll see an increase in major facility projects. So we definitely are trying to get back on track. When we did our K-8 facility reviews, we always tried to keep at the 300,000 level for major projects in our operating budget. And last year, we went down quite a bit because we had a difficult budget year. We're trying to get back there because we know that as we keep chipping away at the projects within those reports, we're being really proactive in maintenance and in those facility projects. So we don't want to fall behind on that and then have a significant expense somewhere because we hadn't been keeping up with it. So you'll see a bit of an increase there for the major facility projects, but like last night I was talking about some of the alignment, but definitely the K-8 facility reports help us to decide on which projects belong in capital and which belong in our operating budget.
Thanks. It's not getting any cheaper, I imagine, down the road.
Yeah.
Sarah?
So you answered a lot of my questions, I think Patty asked them, but just in terms of just following up on the, if you look at pages 40 and 41 that kind of go over some of the building repairs, in-house and contracts, are those increases solely due to the maintenance of phasing back from the warranty period on the FHS building? The dollar changes there, is that 100% due to that on those two pages?
Page 42 is a good example of what I just talked about. Those are the major facility projects. So you see that there's a larger increase there, but just trying to get back to a place that we're maintaining that 300, I mean, it's a little less than 300,000, but we're trying to get back to that level because that is how we kind of projected out getting to those, completing those recommendations within each of the K-8 facilities.
Okay, yeah, and then I was looking at page like 40 and 41 too, though, because they say, in each one of those, the bottom line says, increases due to FHS maintenance phasing back to the
Yeah.
budget after building warranty period. And so my question was just, are those increases
Yeah, that's.
100% due to that, or?
I'm not, yeah.
We did have escalation on the other schools.
Okay.
as well, and then FHS added back in.
Gotcha, okay.
If you look at pages like 43 to 50, those are really kind of detailed.
Sure.
To kind of look, so you can see, for example, at the high school, for the, a 15,000 repairs to building kind of phased back in, that was taken out from the 24-25 budget. So kind of building those kind of back in, and those are broken down, obviously, by the annual repairs, the service contracts, major repair requests, and things. So that could give you a really kind of detailed view of the changes.
Thank you.
Keith?
I may just be reading it wrong. So I see that transportation services had a big jump, but that was mostly due because we switched bus companies, right? We went to specialty and that had a higher contract. Is that correct?
So the changes are really, two. There was the new contract to the new bus company, but a lot of that you'll see is also just the increase in the specialized transportation services.
Yeah. Yeah, Kathy, I'd say, because it's, that big chunk was the special services part of the transportation, right?
Correct.
Okay. And then, probably not important, but the last line of that, under transportation services, where it says part of it was a shift driver positions that were budgeted for transportation previously, were now budgeted under custodians. What's that? Can you explain that to me? Is it just, I don't know.
So with, and I'll ask my historian people to help me out on it. Previously with M&J, there'd be times where they just didn't have the drivers' the capabilities, and so the Farmington Public Schools had 2 drivers kind of on standby to be able to do emergency runs for when they needed it, and apparently, at least as history was told to me, they were needed a lot. And so now with the new contract, we were, a part of the contract was, we were going to have enough drivers and be able to run all the routes, and even for those, and have spare drivers and all those pieces. So now we were able to, really not have a need for those 2, so kind of phase those in, into custodial positions that were needed.
They were performing other tasks such as courier services for us as well, which we also shifted to the float custodians.
Yeah.
Okay.
So
They're doing some of the same functions.
So it's one of those examples of like taking from one part of the budget, putting it in another, and hopefully creating even, like a better outcome by placing in 2 custodians. It's also going to help us with the new central office, maintenance there, and having a custodian that's available in the new central office. There's things that, we have here all day that we are not, it wouldn't be in our budget, and now we have to make sure that we have adequate coverage up at our new central office and field house. So this also addresses, that as well.
So we just have not need for the emergency driver, or we are not allowed to? Is that what you said? That contractually, we're not allowed to have emergency?
I don't know about not allowed, I think they've been able to.
They've had.
Kind of cover.
I don't know if I have my Class A license in the
The drivers typically did pre-K runs.
Okay.
And a couple of other specialized runs, and some of the middays as well.
Okay.
Which are now covered by special.
Gotcha. They weren't taking busloads of kids?
No.
Gotcha.
No.
That's good to know.
And the flow custodian is also going to help out with the overtime costs, because someone's out of the building, we can assign the flow custodian to kind of cover there, and so we're not, having, overtime expenses to kind of have coverage there. It's another place where we're finding cost containment efficiencies.
Thank you.
Amy?
No, I think we've covered mostly everything. I have no questions.
Dave?
So, first item, professional education services has gone down, from what was expended and now what's expended now. So there's a dollar change, percent change. And I was just curious, the last language, this is page 29. So you were able to, I guess, the explanation on the bottom, I'm just trying to get.
So this is that example, that's 320, right?
Yeah.
So this is the example of, we took money out of this line
Yeah.
to then put in the salary line for the position that we had showed you. I think it's occupational therapy. Yeah, therapist.
Okay.
So it's just a movement to, again, we're always trying to find like the most efficient, best quality. It's always both. And so we're at a point where instead of paying like consultant services, we are now moving to hiring someone, but that reduction just moved to salaries.
Got it.
Yeah.
Okay, that's what I figured.
And to kind of add on that a little bit, and Keith, you had mentioned about quality of services. For us being able to hire now an OT really at the same expense, we believe is going to provide a higher quality, right?
Yeah.
Because having your own, having your own person, they'll be able to work with students and kind of build that relationship, build that consistency and thing, as opposed to when we do the outside.
Right.
They provide services, but it might be person A one time, person B, and so you don't have that consistency.
Right.
And so once again, hopefully the quality of services actually increases
Mhm.
with no change in cost.
Right. And that's what I gathered here, which is a big positive.
Absolutely.
Big positive. 34, other professional services. And I was just curious, is this bump driven by like a one-off thing that we have to do this year, an audit, or some other negotiation, or?
We did, this is for the teacher negotiations, I think we would put in there. We have, our FEA negotiations coming up, and so that's usually, obviously a large driver of it, and so that's usually a larger negotiation. So putting that's going to increase, legal fees and that time period putting in there.
Got it. Okay. And then number 60 goes back to IDEA. But I think this is what you explained, where you have 4.5 times, and then basically now they've means tested it to the, your district, your grand list, and you're at a reimbursement of 59%, correct?
Correct.
Got it. Okay. And I would say the last thing is on the repairs, I would think that once we get some of those capital projects done, some of these repair costs will come down, right? Like the different air handlers, the roofs, things like that.
They're usually two separate priorities that we're taking information from the schools, from the reports that we have, also from conditions as they change, and then we're trying to determine what's the most efficient way to address this. So usually those major projects that we put forward are a little smaller than we'd address in a capital project.
Right.
So unless you're talking about like a larger renovate as new type project or something like that, which we don't have.
Okay.
I think we will continually advocate for those major improvements in the operating budget.
Okay.
And then you always have, the surprise, I think, the elevator at the elementary school.
Yep.
At East Farms, I think, just stopped, and so that's gonna be a significant repair that, as much as you wanna try to account for, you can never budget, and.
Correct.
So that kind of, we have to figure out where we're shifting money from there, and then so maybe postpone something else, so, that to-do list always keeps.
Yeah, it never gets knocked down. Got it.
Yeah.
Okay, thanks. I'm good.
Last call for the series. All right, 400.
So this is our supply series. It's about 3% of our budget, and it's a slight increase of 1.23%, around $28,622. There's some things that we had reduced. We're trying to get, in the last year's budget, and we're just trying to move that slowly up. But we're also just dealing with the economy, just like all of us are dealing with in our homes. Supplies are just more expensive. I think we probably would have even put more in here, but we're also acknowledging, that we have a higher budget, so we've, made some reductions here and tried to be as efficient as possible when it comes to supplies and equipment. Both of those are, lower increases maybe than what we've seen in the past.
Keith, you have anything?
No, sir.
Amy?
No.
Dave?
Maybe just explain 73 a little bit, which is audiovisual computer supplies.
So even though this is a supply line, it does include some contractual pieces in there as well. The label is an older label of audiovisual computer supplies. And the majority of this, there were cuts that were made last year. And so there is restoration of funding to continue. We were able to offset those a little bit last year with some remaining ESSER funding, but it's gone, so we're bringing that back for tools that are needed for supporting our students.
Sarah, you have anything?
Yeah, I was just curious, on 75, it's a decrease, but I was just wondering what's the driver of the decrease in gasoline for transportation?
So that's actually, one of the benefits of working with, new transportation company. Specialty has really worked hard on efficiency of routes and looking at that, and so needing actually less, bus runs for, regular ed transportation. And so, with less bus runs, less gasoline, and so we've been seeing a really nice savings, in that area.
That's a good increase.
Yeah, yeah. We've been-
Patty?
Sarah and Dave took my questions.
Brian?
Covered.
All
Thank you,
right.
guys.
Last call? Onward and upward.
Equipment
This is
line,
maybe-
about 1% of our budget. The increase is 7.37%, but this is $27,975. And this is due to, some is a need for equipment, some is restoration of equipment.
$26,000 in restoration of funding for Chromebooks
Yes.
from last year. Which is almost, you're right. Hmm? Trying to account for that this year.
Dave, you have anything?
No.
Amy?
What's a trapezoid map?
You stumped him.
Yeah, no, I want to,
Or the shape. It's
Yeah.
for PE. It's just the shape of the mat.
yeah,
It's expensive.
yes.
Both sides, you know? Should stick with squares.
I don't know, it just jumped out at me. I apologize, but it was kind of like, whoa.
I was trying to remember exactly which activity they were using it for, but it's,
Is it Excel ball, maybe, or something like that?
yeah, it's not coming to me right now, but I can do some research for you again.
It's quite all right. It just, like I said, it just jumped
It's
out.
multifaceted.
Yeah,
Talk to Mr. Dietz tomorrow, drop off.
yeah, yeah.
While everybody's looking for the Chromebooks, are kids becoming more responsible? I know it probably went through a transition period, they're getting beat up a lot. Or are we still, we're still dealing with a lot of cracks and breaks and repairs?
At our middle school level,
Yeah.
middle school is definitely still a problem. At the high school level, it somewhat has leveled out. We're actually working right now on a few things related to high schoolers bringing personal devices. There's more demand for use of their school issued devices, but they tend to take better care of them. Middle school tends to still be our problem. I wouldn't say overall, I wouldn't say we're seeing an increase year after year. It's just more of a concentrated location of where we're seeing the repairs and damage.
Is there an insurance program for parents for like,
It's-
obviously habitual offenders?
It's self-insurance through us as well. It is a curriculum support tool. So it is an opt-in program for parents, and it's to cover incidental damage. It does not cover lost or stolen devices. It does not cover intentional damage. And we do have repeat offenders that, I do have conversations with parents about their students taking care of their Chromebooks, and we do have a replacement fee that we try to assess. But again, given the fact that it is a tool utilized in the curriculum, it is still working with families to ensure that students are taking responsibility.
All right. Any questions for the group? Brian?
One question.
Oh, you want to go, Keith?
Sorry, yeah.
Go ahead.
It's already out. Did Amy? She have a trapezoid. So, I just have a question about the use of, so under the Chromebooks where it talks about restoration of funding from 24-25. So is that basically when you made your budget last year, you had an idea of what you wanted for Chromebooks to be budgeted, to make it work in accordance with your budget and our budget and as a whole, you pulled out some of what you felt you needed, and this year you're saying it must be there, so that's why it's there.
Yeah,
It's not, like, nobody came from on high and said, take this out of the budget.
No, we've